And sorry, kind of had a little bit of a technical issue there, but we'll get right back to it. And I was talking about Duke, Wisconsin. And before we get into that, this is going to be put up in 2 segments. So you're not going to hear it. If you don't hear me, if you finish the last one, go right back to this one. And I'll throw it up there for people to know. But we'll go back to the Duke, Wisconsin game. And what I was talking about is how Duke is not favored. And I actually think this is a reasonable non-favoring, as I actually watched the game versus Wisconsin and seen the way that these big men play for Wisconsin. And you know that the bigger guys for Duke, even though they do got a really good point guard, but Okafor and the other, and I should have wrote this other guy's name down, but them are the big guys that are going to go inside. They don't have the big shot like this Kaminsky and this Decker does. So again, this could be another game like what I said about Kentucky, to where the athleticism of the 2 big men for Wisconsin kind of plays into giving them an advantage against a team that kind of wants to play the inside game. So I think if the 2 big men do the same thing that they've been doing all season, Duke doesn't really have a chance to win. They did win by 10, 80-70 back on December 3rd, though. But this is a different Wisconsin team than then. Now, they only lost 3 games all year total anyways, but you could tell that this Sam Decker's is getting more involved, and they're involving him a lot more as it's going down the stretch. And if this is a different kind of beast going against these bigger guys that have the athleticism that they do have. Decker hitting threes. And that in the game against Kentucky, and many people say that there was kind of a little bit of referee miscues in that game, a lot of calls, but I think the calls went back and forth other than that, of course, shot clock violation, which should be able to be reviewed even though it's not. So the referees kind of got to go where they want to there. So we'll take a break. We'll get to the final segment. This is the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. And welcome back to the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Robert Bowlesby here with you. You can tweet me at rbowlesbyjr. You can tweet the network at Greater STLSN. We'll start off this with a little NBA. As Paul George returned yesterday for the Indiana Pacers against the Miami Heat. Pacers won 111-89, and Paul George scored 13 points in 15 minutes. And what a time for him to come back for the Pacers. As we were talking about last week with basically if a lot of teams being in it for the East with all the losing records, well, Indiana's right there with these teams that are in the 7th and 8th playoff spots. Boston is now in the 8th playoff spot. And Miami is now in the 9th spot, and Indiana's right there. So what a time for a guy like Paul George to come back, to give your team a spark to where you know they're a whole different team with Paul George than they are without him. And they proved that with being the number 2 team in the East with him over the past few years. So for him to come back, and there's not a lot of games left, but if he could come back and just give this team a spark by being out there on the court and being kind of a decoy and maybe not being up to par, this could help this team out a lot going down the stretch and even going into the playoffs and maybe getting that A seed, because you're playing Atlanta. You're not playing the three-headed monster in Cleveland, who's proved that they're probably the better team going down the stretch. And as you've seen in Miami that first year of LeBron, Bosh, and Wade, it takes a while for chemistry to get going. And kind of what happened is LeBron and Kyrie can kind of just take over, and Kevin Love's been in the background for basically the whole thing. And not really in the background. He's gotten his in, but you don't want to play that team right now. You don't want to get to that 7th spot. You kind of hope that you get the 8th spot, and maybe you have a chance against maybe an overachieving team in Atlanta. So it's nice to see for him to come back after that devastating injury, playing for the United States back in August. So for him to come back and play, and maybe he plays well, it's something different to see. Now, a guy who can't stay healthy, as he's had a lot of injuries and can't stay on the court, Derrick Rose said he'll be back this week for the Bulls. Now, I think this is maybe just a little bit of a decoy to kind of make teams kind of play for him, strategize for him. But I don't think they're going to put him out there for a bunch of minutes if they do. I think that's maybe like a 15-minute a game. Kind of what Paul George got. I think that's what you do with Derrick Rose down the stretch. And I don't think you go much above that in the playoffs. I think maybe the highest you go with him is maybe 24 minutes, because you don't want nothing bad to happen to him again. If you're going to get your MVP back, at least put him out there for maybe 24 minutes and get what you can from him and say, hey, you got to sit down now. 12 and 12 minutes in the first half. Make sure he gets enough rest. Make sure that them legs get enough rest to where it's almost impossible for anything bad to happen. So, and they really don't need them because they've been playing pretty well, and they do got guys right now that are playing well chemistry-wise together. So, you don't need him back. So, I don't think they're going to waste him playing him in a lot of minutes, because they're pretty much stuck in the 3rd spot in the playoffs anyways. But we're going to tell a little baseball tidbit now, as the Upton brothers are reunited in San Diego. That sounded like I was interested in that, but it's just a little tidbit. The man formerly known as B.J. Upton, now Melvin Upton Jr., and star closer for the Braves, Craig Kimbrell, were traded to the Padres for Kevin Maben, Carlos Quentin, and 2 prospects, and the first-round pick, or the 41st pick of the draft. Now, many people have been saying that San Diego is going to be a real good team this year. They didn't have a center fielder, so maybe they got their center fielder in Upton Jr., but I don't know if I quite agree with that, because I think Kevin Maben actually plays better than B.J. Upton, and kind of proven it over the past couple years. B.J. only batting .203 last year, and Maben also being a younger guy, they can still get the job done for the team, but I guess you really wanted to make sure you had a guy that could run out that center field. But this is a big ballpark for these kind of guys that they think is going to have all his power. So, even though you got B.J. Upton, you got Matt Kipton, you got Justin Upton, it doesn't mean that they're going to hit very well in one of the worst hitting ballparks in baseball. And like I mentioned, Matt Kipton, Justin Upton, they also traded for Will Myers, who's a young guy that's been a prospect for Kansas City and then played very well for Tampa Bay. And now if you see as it's gone on, he might not even get any playing time with all the guys that San Diego are not forming in their outfield. But back to the pitching, they also signed James Seals. So now you got your number 1 starter, even though he was roughed up a lot in the preseason. And you also got now your closer. Now you got 2 things you can build around to maybe go forward next year. I don't think the Padres are going to be as good as everybody thinks this year, even with all the talent they have, because they're in a little bit of a rough division with the Dodgers. Now, there's the other teams, and 3 teams in that division are kind of an afterthought after the Dodgers. But you got to, I mean, they want to throw San Diego in there, but I don't think with that ballpark that you're going to have to build a team kind of like the old Cardinals, 80s Cardinals. You know, a lot of fast guys that get base hits, like Matt Carpenters and people like that. People that are going to get on base, not people that have the power and stuff like that, because that ballpark's just too big for them kind of people. Now, a little bit of NFL news. Deshaun Golston, formerly of the 49ers, was now with Tampa Bay, was traded to the Redskins. So now, Tampa Bay, both their starting safeties last year are gone for Lovie Smith. Mark Barron was traded to the Rams, kind of to be that blitz guy and little kind of dime corner. And now your other safety, Deshaun Golston, is in Washington. Now, he did have a high contract, $8 million per year. Tampa Bay will pay half of that. But still, he's been a top guy in the league for the last few years. And now you got rid of your starting safeties. And Lovey is one of them guys that think, I can get a guy to do whatever I need to in my system. It kind of happened with London Fletcher. And I can't even remember the guy's name. But when we let go of London Fletcher, he said, oh, this guy from Tampa Bay that I coach, he can play in this system. So things like this hasn't always worked out for Lovey, but maybe he's seen something in them two guys that didn't work in his cover 2 system. And Deshaun Golston, we in St. Louis know how good he is he was one of them 2 safeties that we talked about a lot for the 49ers, and him and Dante Whitner. So he is a good player. He is getting a little older, but I don't know what they're trying to do in Tampa Bay. And maybe they're tanking. Maybe they're doing the 76ers game. Maybe we just trade all our good players for now. Keep Vincent Jackson down to your wide receiver. Keep your offense around so we can go out and get Winston. Maybe play McCown, or I think McCown went somewhere else, but play Glennon or somebody like that and set him out for a year. Maybe we get the first round pick next year and we can get another good player to put around him, maybe a left tackle, or maybe we get that real good defensive player. Or maybe they, like I said, Lovey thinks he can do something better with that team. Now, something I wanted to get into, even though maybe it's a little too old for me, was something that was kind of named today, and that was for JoJo White, a St. Louisan who will be named into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Now, he was drafted in 69, so it's a little bit before I was born. I was born in 87. But I just kind of want to get it out there when guys like this do it that are from St. Louis do these kind of things, because I think it should be celebrated. Now, these are his accomplishments in the NBA and college. He's a 2-time NBA champion. He's the 1976 Finals MVP, 7-time All-Star, 2-time All-Time NBA second team, All-Rookie first team. He was a 2-time consistent second team All-American. He also won gold medals in 1969, and he won the Pan America gold in 1967. Now, this is how good of an athlete he was. He was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys and the Cincinnati Reds. So that tells you how good of an athlete this guy was. If he could have picked any sport he wanted to play, and he picked basketball, and he was drafted in the first round by the Celtics. Number 9 overall. It was either number 9 or over 6 overall. So that tells you what kind of player that he is. And I got it right here where he was drafted. He was drafted in 1969, and he was the 9th pick overall. He also played for the Warriors, and then also played for the Kansas City Kings. His number 10 is retired by the Celtics. And over his career, now this is a guy that got drafted by an MLB team and an NFL team. His career, he averaged 17.2 points a game, 4.9 assists, 4.2 rebounds. So that kind of shows you, even though I didn't see it, but just looking at it on paper and watching the little bit of videos they got around of him, shows what kind of player he was. And then you could tell he was also kind of great player in Kansas in college, because in 07 he was inducted into their Sports Hall of Fame, or excuse me, 97. And then his number was retired by Kansas in 2003. Now in 2009 he was in the Marine Corps Sports Hall of Fame. And then I don't know what took so long, but St. Louis is always late to the game on all kinds of stuff like this. He was entered in the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame in 2013. So it's nice to see a guy like this get recognition. And then also a guy from St. Louis get recognition as a Hall of Famer and one of the best basketball players of his generation. Well, thank you for listening today, and we're just going to do it. We'll see you next time. I'm Robert Bowlesby, and this is the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network.